Hey my dudes, it's time for another week of Bageriet Lördag, the Saturday bakery. This week I have some really exciting news for you all. I'm gonna get into that in just a second, but if you're new here, I run a bakery from my apartment called Bageriet Lördag, and I sell pastry boxes. Each box contains 4 different pastries, and the menu changes every single week. On the menu this week we have chocolate mini cakes with cardamom, Swiss meringue, buttercream, and poached pears, snickerdoodles, hazelnut bars, and last but not least, Swedish-style apple buns. Let's get started so I can tell you all about my week and share my news. Last week, as some of you may have noticed, I took a break and didn't do any baking. No pastry boxes, no Bageriet Lördag. I didn't even do any new content. I just reposted some of my old videos. Well, that's because I've quit my job, and all last week I was busy training my replacement. I've mentioned before that I have a 9-to-5 office job, and I was there for about a year. I felt like I couldn't really talk about it much while I was there, but now that I'm not, I can give you guys some more details. So I was an office manager, and my job was basically to take care of the office and also be like a receptionist. It was so great. First of all, everyone was super chill and nice. It was very low pressure, especially coming from restaurants. No one was screaming or freaking out or being passive aggressive or any of that. My main tasks were like filling the coffee machines with coffee and milk and setting up breakfast a couple days a week. I made sure we had office supplies. If anything broke, I got it fixed. And then if anyone came into the office, I welcomed them and notified whoever they were there to meet. I kept things organized, ordered in food and alcohol, and generally helped whoever needed whenever they needed it. I definitely could have stayed at that job, but as Bageriet Lördag began to grow in popularity, I just felt like it's now or never. I am a leap off a cliff, take a risk, take a chance kind of person, and all the other times I've done something like this, like when I went to South America at 18 instead of going to college, or when I moved to Sweden by myself at 22, or when I took a job as a 3-star pastry chef at 26, even though I was way underqualified. All of those times taking a big chance, a big risk has paid off eventually. So all that to say, this week was my first week fully at home, and I sold 93 boxes, which is like double of what I have been doing. So we are really going for it now. As usual for Wednesdays, I scaled all my ingredients, or at least as much as I could. I weighed out all the ingredients for 4 batches of buns and a very large batch of hazelnut bars, but then I ran out of containers, so I will finish scaling tomorrow. Then I did some small tasks. I made cocoa pan release for the chocolate cakes. I made cinnamon sugar for the snickerdoodles. I made an apple syrup for the apple buns. And lastly, I toasted the hazelnuts to rub the skins off. This did not work out super well. I try to always buy skinless hazelnuts, but they didn't have them in bulk, so here we are. Leave me your best hazelnut de-skinning tips in the comments. Then I folded boxes for what felt like forever, but at least I was listening to my audiobook, so I didn't hate my life too much. Thursday is for buns, and as we are doing more than ever this week, obviously they were the first thing I got started with. Dough number 1 got popped on the mixer, and I immediately moved on to the apple filling. I needed to do this quickly, as not only did the filling have to cook, but also cool before I could use it in the buns. I used 2 types of Swedish apples, Aroma and Discovery. I always use at least 2 varietals because I can never remember which types hold their shape and which become like applesauce, so I was hedging my bets. Dough number 1 was done, so it got put in the fridge to rest, and dough number 2 went into the machine. While that was happening, I made the butter filling for the buns. I put just a touch of cinnamon in it. I wanted just enough to help the apples taste more like apple-y. Finally, the apples were cooked to my liking, and I added a bit of lemon juice for brightness. Fortuitously for all of us, I am an apple picking genius, and one of the varietals was a sauce apple, and one of them was a keep it together apple, so the filling was perfect. Dough number 2 was done and also went into the fridge, and dough number 3 went into the machine. I mixed the butter and sugar for the bars and immediately grew suspicious. I had just made this batter the other day, and it felt wrong, so I checked my math, and I had made a typo in my spreadsheet. The standard size batch was supposed to have 135 grams of sugar, but instead it said 235. So when I calculated the large batch, I ended up with like 600 grams too much sugar. Fortunately, I caught the problem before I added in the other ingredients, and I'm just going to save this sugar butter mixture and turn it into next week's bun filling, but it was a stressful moment. Dough 3 was done, and the last dough went into the machine, and I started adding egg to the new butter sugar mixture. This time everything felt as it should. I added the almond flour, mixed it into a dish, precautions, dough number 4 was done, and I put that away, and now I'm just realizing I got exactly 0 film of me adding chopped hazelnuts to the batter. Oops, but okay, so you guys know there's a bunch of chopped hazelnut in that batter as well. I greased and lined the baking pans, divided the batter into 4, and started baking them off 2 at a time. Finally, it was bun time, and I'm thinking by now maybe you guys know the drill, but it's roll out, slap on the filling, spread it out, in this case slap on filling number 2, spread that out, fold into 3, re-roll, cut into strips, and then I went with my favorite little swirly I've been vibing with all year. But the buns were made and put away, and then I made a honey caramel sauce for the hazelnut bar topping. While that cooked, I chopped the hazelnuts by smashing them. This is way faster than cutting. Once the caramel sauce was ready, I poured it into the hazelnuts and then threw that on top of all the trays, divided equally of course, and then threw those 2 at a time into the oven to bake again. Then I made more buns. Sing it with me, you guys. Roll, plop, spread, re-roll, cut, swirl, freeze. Last time, from the top, roll, plop, spread, re-roll, cut, swirl, freeze. Woohoo! The last hazelnut bars were out of the oven looking gorgeous, and that was that for Thursday. Friday is mini cake day. As some of you may remember, when I started, I had 12 mini cake molds. Then over the summer, I was able to get my hands on 36 more thanks to my mom, so I had a total of 48, which was perfect because I was selling 45 boxes. But this week, since I have so much time now, since this is my full-time gig, I was like, oh, I'll just double it. This was super great because I don't know if you guys know this, but I actually love hand washing 48 little aluminum molds by hand twice in one day. It's so much fun. Good thing I freaking love these little mini cakes. It makes all the work worth it for sure. The molds got all greased up with cocoa pan release, and I made the chocolate cake batter. I have started blending my eggs with an immersion blender before adding them to batters and stuff, and wow, it actually makes such a difference in these large batches. Like, it really helps get everything incorporated so much faster and easier. If I was using a stand mixer, I wouldn't have to do that, but I think it's easier to make one big batch of batter in the large pot, which is the largest vessel that I own, than it would be to make like 4 batches in my stand mixer. I will do anything to do less dishes, except take mini cakes off the menu, of course. Speaking of dishes, I made 3 rounds of cardamom Swiss meringue buttercream. One day I will have a bigger stand mixer that has multiple bowls, and I won't have to wash every single thing after I use it, simply to go back and use it again, but today is not that day, and it's actually kind of nice because it forces me to stay on top of the dishes. All the buttercream whipped together really easily today, and I was able to make a round of buttercream while the cakes baked, so I just went back and forth between the 2 until they were both done. Then I knocked out round 1 of the cakes. I slide an offset around the edges, flip each mold upside down, pull it off, and slide the bottoms off. Once all the cakes were unmolded, I wrapped each tray in plastic. Then I washed all the molds, and it was time to start all over again. I brushed each mold with pan release. I made the same chocolate cake batter as before, and I poured in exactly 110 grams of cake batter into each little mold. While the second round of cakes was getting baked off, I started the poached pears. I kept it really simple and just simmered peeled pears in simple syrup. I didn't want to do wine or spices or anything. I wanted the pear to taste like pear. In retrospect, I should have bought some pear liqueur and thrown that in there, but we live and we learn. Next up was snickerdoodles. Again, I didn't want to make 2 batches, so I just made a ginormous batch in my large pot. The dough came together nicely, and then I got to scooping. Each scoop got tossed in cinnamon sugar before getting put on a tray, and we'll get a second coat of cinnamon sugar tomorrow before baking. Once those were all scooped, all my cakes were done. At this point, I had been so annoyed with my bangs, I had bobby pinned them back, thinking to take the pins out once the camera was rolling, but I forgot. It looks a little dorky, I know, but I could not stand my bangs anymore. I wrapped the cakes up, and that was Friday. This Saturday was a tough one, I'm not gonna lie. Yesterday, I had made that huge batch of snickerdoodles, and in the evening, I decided to bake one off. 1, because I wanted a cookie and I had made a few extra, and 2, because after the thumbprint disaster of a few weeks ago, I do not trust the cookies. Well, it was a good thing I did because I had added too much cream of tartar and the cookies were tangy. It was actually an interesting flavor I'd like to explore in the future, but just not what one would expect from a snickerdoodle. I was kind of on the fence because like in one way it was kind of good, but in another way it was like wasn't the expectation. So I asked Axel to try them and he agreed. It was just over the edge of being too tangy and therefore weird, so I decided to just redo the whole batch. I got up extra early and banged out the new batch of cookies and started slamming them in the oven. I did all of this off camera because my first priority is always my paying customers, of course, and I really needed to focus. But once the dough was
made and scooped and I was just baking off rounds, I felt able to split my focus between filming and baking. So rough start to the morning, but the second batch of cookies was much better and I was really happy with how they turned out. Now, I could have easily completely hidden this from you guys and not talked about it, but I just wanted to show you that everyone makes mistakes. One of the differences between very, very high-end fine dining kitchens and the best of the best bakeries and like your average ones is not that really good kitchens and bakeries don't make mistakes. They do. They just have systems so that those mistakes never make it to the guest or the customer. Mistakes are how you learn. You just gotta fix it so they don't affect anyone else. Anyways, while I was baking off the snickerdoodles, I was also slicing the hazelnut bars. These sliced like a dream, but were a little hard to get out of the pans at first. After the first two, I realized that they were just too cold and the caramel was sticking inside, so if I took them out of the fridge 15 minutes before trying to turn them out, they came out much easier. See, you live and you learn. Once the snickerdoodles were done baking, I moved on to the apple buns. The timeline was tight today, you guys. I was running about 45 minutes behind my oven schedule for obvious reasons, and then the buns were taking like 5 minutes extra per tray in the oven because they were just so juicy from the apple. I mean, they all got baked off in time, but I was definitely flirting with that deadline. As each tray of buns came out of the oven, I brushed it with an apple simple syrup and topped it with raw sugar. I re-whipped the SMBC to make it fluffy and piped a squiggle on each little cake. Then I topped each cake with a slice of poached pear. Matilda came over and we packed up all the boxes and took the wagon out to the park. And now we even have a table.
And that's it for this week. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you're in Stockholm and would like to buy a pastry box, then follow Bageriet Lördag on Instagram. Every Tuesday at noon in my stories, I post a link to the pre-order order form. So you go into the order form, you put in all your information, you prepay. That's on Tuesdays. And then on Saturday, you come, you pick up your box, you eat pastries, you be happy. We all have a great time. If you want more like short form, behind the scenes type of vlogs, then you can follow me on either Instagram or TikTok at Cecilia.Talone. For long form vlogs just like this one, as well as recipe tutorials, you can hit that subscribe button down below. I have also typed up the new version of the apple buns, and that recipe is now on Substack for paid subscribers. But I already have a YouTube video of kind of like an old version that I did last year. I have updated the recipe for Substack, but if you want the free version, that's also available here on YouTube. And both of those links are down below in the description. I hope that you have a great week and that I'll see you around next week. Hej då!